So hello everyone and welcome to this CREGÉS conference co-organized with ACT Project in recognition of today World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. My name is Sarita Israel and I'm the coordinator of the area of expertise to counter mistreatment here at CREGÉS. So we kindly ask you to turn off your microphone. You can leave your camera on or off. The presentation will be approximately 45 minutes followed by an question and answer period that will be done via chat. Also, during the presentation, we will be asking you to fill out an instant survey. The recording of today's presentation will be available on our website, and all registered participants will receive the material by email as well as an evaluation form. So today we are proud to present an escape room on older adult mistreatment named Sandra's Keys. So before we begin, I will ask my three fellow presenters and leaders of this project to present themselves. Kim? Constance, maybe you can go.
Yes, I'm not sure if Kim's joined us yet. So
Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Constance Lafontaine, and I'm the Associate Director of Aging Communication Technologies.
Scott?
Hi, I guess I'll go. Yeah, I guess I'll go next. I am a student that works with Aging Communication Technology, and I'm finishing my MA here at Concordia University in Communication Studies.
Gabrielle, are we having a problem joining, having Kim join us?
Non, Kim vient juste de nous rejoindre, ça ne peut se présenter.
So Kim, you're just in time to present yourself.
Great. Hi. Sorry, I'm in the country and the internet is iffy here. My name's Kim Sawchuk and I'm the director of ACT Aging Communication Technologies. Did you hear? Sorry.
We did.
Okay.
Sorry, it's going to take a little bit of adjustment with the slides and 4 presenters, but Kim will get us started.
Your microphone.
Sorry. So there are 3 partners who are involved in this project. Aging Communication Technologies are ACT, le Centre de Recherche d'Expertise en Gérontologie Sociale, or CREGÉS, and RECA, Respecting Elders Communities Against Abuse, or Réseau ethnoculturel contre l'abus envers les aînés, a community organization that we have been working with since 2013. So just to say a little bit about RECA. RECA are an organization that specifically does forum theater. We've collaborated on all kinds of public outreach events to bring public awareness to the issue of older adult mistreatment, including a flash mob to commemorate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. They've also done puppet theaters, they've done videos, they've done blogs, and most recently they have, today, or June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and RECA is organizing a series of events for their membership, and as well a petition called Stop the Deaths, which is trying to bring public attention to the ongoing issue of what's happening in the CIUSSS in Montreal, but also to remind us that this is just an amplification and a spotlight on a problem that, from the perspective of RECA, they've been trying to draw our attention to for many, many years. It's also worth noting that as a group who's dealing with different and diverse cultural communities, that RECA's way of doing outreach through forum theater also allows them to communicate in multiple languages to people who are often left out of the kind of outreach efforts that governments sometimes institute.
Okay, so what you see on the screen right now are some of the tools from the PanCanadian Project, It's Not Right. This is a project that addresses the concerns of bystanders that facing situations of mistreatment may either do the wrong thing or not do anything at all. So it's to promote a respectful and safe way of approaching mistreatment and knowing how to accompany someone regardless of the choice they make. So this is a project by which we kind of based our, our principles and the underlying values of the workshop, well, the project that we're talking about today. So I did actually a workshop with the team just for them to experience the tools and experience a little bit A, the understanding of what mistreatment really feels like, and two, what a bystander really feels like facing situations of mistreatment.
And so as a team, these tools are actually extremely helpful because, as we're going to get into further detail later, we built a game kind of using these as a core way to think about how we both design the interaction for players, but also how we considered how we would talk to people after the game about the larger issues around mistreatment, abuse, and neglect. And so Sarita giving us a workshop was extremely helpful in terms of producing all of that.
So the other partner along with CREGÉS and RECA is ACT. And ACT, Aging Communication Technologies, is a research project based at Concordia. And so we've had long working histories with both RECA and CREGÉS. And so one element that I'd like to talk about that informs a lot of our work with the escape room has been our work with different communities in Montreal. So for instance, for years we've been working in low-income housing, and through those experiences with communities, we've been able to build research projects from there, in a sense, and be exposed to different realities that might otherwise not find their way in research agendas. So for instance, from working in low-income housing, we've been able to do some work on what are misleading and aggressive practices by telecommunication service providers in Canada, which we then translated into a kind of policy engagement and an intervention at the CRTC that was very much informed by our collaboration with RECA in this case, and their insights onto how these realities correspond to mistreatment for a lot of seniors.
Okay, so I'm going to give you the official definition of mistreatment. Here in Quebec, we do have one. It's in our action plans. It's in many of our documents. And, we talk about elder abuse, we talk about mistreatment, we're talking about the same thing. So the idea really is to look at what is mistreatment and what we should be concentrating on when we think about mistreatment. So mistreatment is a single or repeated act or lack of appropriate action occurring within any relationship where there's an expectation of trust which causes harm or distress to an older adult, whether the person deliberately wants to cause harm or not. And this is a very key point of this definition, because we know, as a matter of fact, that mostly people mean well, but it doesn't mean because you mean well that sometimes you do the right thing and unfortunately you can cause harm. So the beauty of this definition and what underlies is we're looking for what is the problem in order to find the solution. We're not looking for a culprit. Another part of this definition, which is very important to keep in mind, it occurs in a situation, in a relationship where there should be trust. Usually we're talking about who? Family members or people that provide a service or a caregiver. And it's that aspect of that relationship that creates trust that makes it very difficult for the older person to disclose that they may be in a situation of mistreatment because they may not want to lose the relationship, or because they trust someone, they feel everything's okay. Therefore, the importance of doing awareness on mistreatment.
So why an escape room on older adult mistreatment? It seems like an odd thing, perhaps, to some of you. And it's not because we were looking to scandalize people, but we're always trying to find different outreach strategies and to also bring visibility and attention to something that, no matter how much organizations like CREGÉS or RECA work, sometimes feel that there's not much interest, or somebody thinks that it's happening somewhere else and nobody they know is being affected. So there's this first need for visibility. Second, a really important presupposition for working with ACT and working with CREGÉS and RECA is to think about involving older adults and organizations who are directly affected with these issues into the strategies for conducting outreach, but also thinking of ways to bring visibility so that we're properly representing the issue. Third is that we are firmly also believe in intersectoral approaches, which by that definition is really, we don't want to just be academics working on these issues or problems and finding solutions for others. We work alongside and with people, and we learn as much as anybody else from these kinds of engagement. And for us, that's why an intersectoral approach is so valuable. And then finally, really to try and reach the media and to try and reach other audiences. Sometimes, as we know from media communication studies, you need a kind of strategic hook to try and get the public and the media interest. We're vying for attention in a very large landscape where there's many other issues that are trying to attract people's interest. So we're always looking for a way to kind of bring attention to an issue through a kind of interesting or unforeseen juxtaposition that will help us to attract different audiences and allow for these 4 principles to stand.
So you should have a survey quickly appear on your screen, but we're going to just quickly what an escape room is. And so I'm kind of curious who all here today has done an escape room before, is aware what it is. So if you just want to give a quick yes, no there, and we can kind of just see how familiar everyone here is today with what escape rooms are. They are kind of a more growing and popular genre. And so it's always nice to kind of see how popular they are. The research shows that they're very popular among younger age cohorts, but our project definitely wanted to bring it towards older age cohorts. And as we'll discuss later, that wasn't necessarily the case. Just kind of a basic definition is on the slide there. So escape rooms are team-based games. They can be actually online or in person. And it looks like we're almost just over 50-50, 60-40. So there you bring people into a room, in our case, and there's a bunch of puzzles, clues, challenges, and there's an overarching kind of plot or narrative. And this team of players are trying to kind of figure out these clues and puzzles in order to escape or get out of the space. And so we had the idea of making an escape room, but that does bring a lot of questions because we recognize that it's a game format, and what we're talking about here is quite a serious issue when we're talking about mistreatment and abuse. And so we gathered people like Sarita and Rekha and our other partners mentioned before to kind of help us in our creation of this. And we actually also took a large core group of the design team to an escape room in Montreal, and we played 2 separate games with them to kind of give them experience, because as we're aware today as well, not everyone knows what an escape room is. And so Sarita, along with Rekha and some ACT members, played some escape rooms. They came out of it all excited, talking about all the ideas and possibilities. I recommend, if you've never done it, once perhaps this pandemic is over and they're open again, to go check one out. But they are growing in popularity, and they're quite an immersive space in how they function, in the sense that there's kind of like an interactive theater set that you're in, that you're looking at clues and puzzles for.
Okay, so needless to say, this was a very novel thing for me. And it's a very novel idea, and I didn't really know at all what it was. And the experience actually brought out all kinds of things. And the co-design is extremely important when you come up with something so new, and what it means to different people and how you're going to respond to it. In the case of this one, especially trying to do some a medium that is that's used more with younger generations, it was very important that the co-design involve people from different generations, different cultural perspectives, different different sectors also. I mean, Rekha uses certain material in doing its awareness programs. I use certain materials in doing our awareness programs where we are, and this was something new. So just having to experience it yourself was very helpful in seeing what would people like the members of Rekha or myself respond to, and how should we adapt our game accordingly.
Another important element of the co-design was also to blur the boundaries between the players and professional game designers. So a lot of us on the design team were not professional game designers, but we also were working, for instance, with somebody who had a lot of experience working and designing games, but realizing along the way that everyone brought a certain amount of experience and knowledge to this design, and all of it was complementary. So it was very much a process that valued each participant's knowledge and experience, and that was absolutely key from the beginning, knowing that we were designing a game on elder abuse. It was, going back to Kim's point earlier, we couldn't think of designing this without input from someone like Sarita with her experience, and also from older adults themselves, especially older adults who work on questions of elder abuse. And this is very much influenced by our longstanding commitment to participatory action research.
And so we mentioned before, and we're going to kind of just expanding on that, the idea of iterative design. So when you're making a game, you don't just produce one copy of it and send it out and call it done. Design in general, not just for games, but things in general, take a series of actions and steps. And so especially because we were dealing with such sensitive material, we wanted to make sure we were taking our time and inviting our partners along with us in that process, in the sense that we created a series of prototypes, both just on paper, but also physical prototypes for people to try out, that we would consistently bring back to RECA and CREGÉS for their feedback and for their input. And so over the course of building and designing the project, we had a series of different workshops and meetings talking about things between the narrative of what the game might be, to what the environment of the game might look like, to here are some puzzles and challenges we've developed. Do these work? Do these make sense? Let's go back to the literature. Let's go back to the experts consistently throughout it. And so it was consistent consulting that happened throughout the design process, both within the core design team, but also back to our experts that we were working with.
So we're kind of three foundational challenges, some of which my collaborators have mentioned before. We didn't want to simulate mistreatment. We were clear about that. We didn't want to trivialize the issue, nor did we want to suggest that mistreatment is something that can easily be escaped, and that we were also not offering a solution or an easy solution. And thirdly, we were really sensitive to the multiple challenges of discussing such a difficult and sensitive topic, by which there's a great deal, I think, of denial and a lot of misunderstanding as well. And we also wanted to include people of different backgrounds, of different experiences, and of different ages. So those were our foundational challenges. Sarita?
So how did we address some of these? Well, basically, it was very important for us to prepare people to debrief post, the experience, because people are going to add all kinds of, value judgments, etc. So that's where, as a matter of fact, it's not right, was very important on helping people. You normalize people's reaction, and then you propose maybe an approach that may be more effective in terms of how to look at the problem and how to maybe respond to it. Also, whenever you talk about a problem, you have to be ready to, respond to it. So this may bring up things with people that are participating, or may say, oh my God, I know somebody in this situation. What are the resources? What are the services that are available, to deal with the reality of mistreatment if you know somebody who's in that situation, or if you feel you would like to discuss more about it. So, we did refer, we have a fantastic resource, the Elder Mistreatment Helpline. Also, the key is, and this is when we talk about it's not right, why it was created, the importance of the role that the bystander can make to help someone open or close a door to getting help. So really just putting out there that if you're going to see something and you're going to do something about it, you have to watch what you do so that it becomes a helpful experience, that you can lead a person and support a person. And like I say, whatever choice it is that they make, people are in certain situations. For them, it's okay. For you, it's not. But how do you still want to support them? And one thing that we want to make sure is that people knew they were going into a game that was looking for signs of mistreatment. The idea is you don't want to have a surprise. If you don't want to talk about mistreatment, you're not ready for it, don't. You can do it when you're ready. So we didn't want anybody to be almost, look at something that maybe they didn't want to look at or they weren't prepared for. So it was from the outline saying, we're looking at a game where we're going to look for clues on mistreatment of older adults. And that is actually a very hard topic. No one likes mistreatment. It's hard to see an older adult being mistreated. Maybe you don't even want to think about it.
We also realized that we needed to be realistic about the information that could be communicated within the parameters of a game. We know that mistreatment is a complex topic, and we didn't have illusions that we could cover everything. We also, because we wanted to reach a wide audience, including older adults, we wanted to make a game that is accessible and engaging to a lot of people, contrary to a lot of escape rooms that exist on the market that can be really dim, or that can require some kind of physical challenges. We wanted to be inclusive.
And so in order to kind of solve these other issues that we were kind of dealing with, one of the first things we had to do was kind of figure out, because mistreatment is such a large topic, we had to figure out which kind of aspects of mistreatment we wanted to focus on for the game. And so you'll see here, we focus on psychological, physical, financial, and denial of rights, but we also wanted to do it in a way that was counter to perhaps some norms that are common. So for example, instead of showing physical abuse through violence, we looked at how like medication was being taken away from an individual. Additionally, I mentioned before that escape rooms are very much like an interactive set or a physical kind of room that tells a story in and of itself. And so we focus on kind of this idea of creating a space that when players go into it, they can kind of piece together for themselves a little bit about this person in their life. At the same time, we recognize that escape rooms aren't necessarily common or known to everyone, so we wanted to make the game a bit shorter and not too challenging, because our goal wasn't like a commercial room to challenge the players and see if they can beat a time and see if they can even get out. Our goal is to have them to kind of go through this experience. And so we made the game difficulty not too challenging and relatively short so that players could experience the full kind of game in most contexts. And then at the same time, around inclusivity and accessibility, we try to make the clues diverse. They're not just all literary clues or just all auditory clues, but there's a range of skills needed for that. And so as a team, you can kind of, if someone's weak in one area, they could help someone out with another in another area, and vice versa. And while also designing the space in mind for walkers or wheelchairs to kind of move through it. And so unfortunately, I just moved my mic there. So we did an initial play test in March around, and it lasted for about 3 weeks, and we had kind of a rough room set up. So we borrowed some spaces here at Concordia University, and we set up some props and some clues and puzzles, and we brought back our co-design team. We brought in other game designers. We invited some older adults that we are friends with or know to come and try out this prototype version of the room. And so they did an initial play test. We did post-game discussions, both just around the design, but also in testing that debrief that Sarita mentioned before. And so this was extremely helpful in terms of, this was playtest 1. We then took a break, fixed it up again, and we did another playtest before we actually put the final product out. And each of these times we were able to kind of revisit what we were working on and see what was working well, what wasn't working well, and what changes needed to be addressed.
So after the playtest, we launched this at this public symposium that was co-organized with Engage, Concordia's Center for Aging, called BOLD, or Be Old, that included a wide variety of events, including panel discussions, kiosks with community partners, a tent, which you can see in one of the slides, where we were collecting responses from people to create a podcast. And so what happened is that we had about 20 participants who participated over 4 or 5 days that we were able to mount the game. One thing to note, it's quite a bit of work to do this. So Scott would be there greeting people, and there was a debrief team on hand, and 2 or 3 people would go in at a time and play for about a half an hour. And then we would have a discussion afterwards. As mentioned, the debrief session for about 30 minutes, and then you'd have to reset the game and wait for the next couple of people to come in and replay. So we didn't collect data for this on people's responses to the game. We could not get ethics from our university in time to do that, but what we could do is just see in general whether or not there was interest, and also to learn what the debrief yielded, because when you play an escape room commercially, you don't have a debrief. And what I will say is that as someone who participated in a number of debriefs with the team and with RECA and with the members of CREGÉS and with members of ACT, is that the testimonials and the responses were really, really moving. Not so much because of the game itself, but because of just the suggestive nature of something where people had time to reflect in a profound way about things they realized they had noticed in their own lives in the past, but hadn't had a place to really talk about it. And so it acted as a kind of trigger, not in a bad way, but it triggered certain kinds of memories and issues that people were receptive to discussing. The outreach we did was pretty successful, and we had some media coverage on CBC and elsewhere. And again, I think the format lent itself to that interest.
The room. So if you look at this room, by the way, I can't tell you how hard Scott and everybody else worked to put that room together. It's a gorgeous room, and this fit into a box like you wouldn't even believe you're going into a room. But what I want to draw your attention to is, doesn't look like anything could possibly be going wrong in that place. It's neat, it looks nice, everything's fine. And this is what, you know, in a room, if you don't look out for something, you don't pay attention, you may miss very important clues and something may be going wrong.
And so when players kind of come into the space, and we mentioned before that we wanted players to kind of be positioned as bystanders and allies. And so we present this kind of starting narrative that's on your screen here, which is the idea that Sandra has lost her keys and she's asked her building janitor to let you in, and you're positioned as good friends of Sandra. And she's been asked if you can kind of go through her place because she can't remember where she left them. She thinks they're in her safe, and if you can go in there and get them for her. Unfortunately, she forgot to tell the janitor the combination to the safe. So as players, that's kind of the challenge that you have to go through. And so you have about 30 minutes before you're supposed to meet her in order to help her get to her appointment. And so that's kind of the premise we set them in on, that they're allies more than they're just kind of people going through her room. Oh, sorry. So when you go into the room, the initial puzzles are kind of all throughout the space, and one that you'll initially find is a cassette inside a drawer, and you have an answering machine on the table that you can put the cassette into, and it will start to play a message, which I think we have on the next slide here.
Yeah. So at this point, we're going to challenge you all to solve one of the clues that was in the room, which we've obviously modified a little bit so it could fit a Zoom presentation. So let's see if the audio works, but you also have the text.
Hey Mom, sorry that I missed our last visit. Listen, I know that you enjoy seeing Mr. Plant, Madame Rose, and Mrs. Cardinal at bingo on Saturdays, but I just don't want to drive you there anymore. It's exhausting to get you into the car with your mobility issues, okay? And I'm not sure when it became my job to taxi you around. I mean, the bus stop is only a 30-minute walk from your apartment, and I think the exercise would probably do you some good. And if you're not feeling up to getting yourself there, then just stay home. Look, let's just try to see this as an opportunity to try some healthier habits, okay? Oh, look at the time. I gotta run. Love you. Bye.
Okay, so that's the recording that you have. That's the context. And now imagine you're in the room, whoops, and you see these items in the room. What do you do? So I will challenge everyone to another, let's take 2 minutes for this. And in about 30 seconds, I'm going to go back to the text so that you may see if you missed anything when you listen to it for the first time. And after 2 minutes, we're going to pause and we're going to encourage you to write in the chat what you think the solution might be. And Scott has posted the text in the chat in case anybody wants to look at it. Sorry, everybody. All right. Thanks everyone who's chimed in. We have a couple people who figured it out. So if you—
I'm impressed.
Yeah,
I'm impressed too. Really.
Good job, everybody. So here the clues in the recording were Mr. Plant, Mrs. Rose, and Mrs. Cardinal. It was important to remember the order. And then you had another clue, oh, look at the time, was an indication to look towards the clock. And then there are little images inside the clock, each corresponding to a number. And so it was Plant 3, Rose 9, and then Cardinal 6, corresponding to the 3-digit lock that would open with that code. So as you could see, this was also an indication of mistreatment. This was one of the clues that also triggered a lot of conversations, as we'll discuss a bit later. It was an indication towards psychological mistreatment. So all of the clues, all of the puzzles sort of embedded that sort of element that would be later fleshed out and discussed and contextualized in the debrief session after the game.
So as mentioned, the room contained 4 puzzles. 3 of those puzzles needed to be solved before you could get to the 4th puzzle. So why did we choose this puzzle format? It's because it gave participants the possibility to go through the room in a more flexible way.
So basically, if you look at different types of mistreatment, it's rare that one type of mistreatment is alone. Put it this way, if someone financially mistreats you, chances are there's going to be a psychological impact. If you don't have a lot of income, there could be a physical impact because you don't have enough money to get your medication. And anytime you stop someone or you affect someone's life in a negative way, you're denying them the right to be, to live free of mistreatment and to live, in peace and with respect. So it's actually very reflective of the reality.
And so just super quickly, as you kind of see in the images of the room, we were trying to kind of tell a story about Sandra and her life there. And so as Sarita mentioned before, nothing immediately seems out of place in this space, but as you start to investigate and look through it, trying to find these keys and these clues, you start to come across some other pieces that might be interpreted in another way. And when you start to put these kind of flags or instances together, you might kind of construct a larger narrative for yourself.
So what we sought to build a space that didn't necessarily replicate stereotypes about aging. And we also wanted to show elements in the room that conveyed a protagonist with a rich life and not only a kind of story of somebody who was dealing with a situation of mistreatment. But we also wanted to include objects and lack of objects to also as clues towards mistreatment. So for instance, an empty fridge hinting perhaps at physical or financial mistreatment. Also empty pill bottles that factor into another puzzle that we have. Also, we had a few kind of canned goods that were hidden away inside the space to show that the person was hiding some of their resources.
Yes, so all those small objects became an important element that led to the conversation in the debrief sessions, which, as I mentioned, were facilitated by all members of the team from ACT, RECA, and CREGÉS. 30 minutes was an average. They could be anywhere from 20 minutes, and if we had the time and it was over lunch, some of those conversations were close to an hour. We had a list of questions we wanted to ask to facilitate and instigate the conversation. Not just, was it easy to solve the puzzle, but asking, well, how did the room make you feel? And how did you feel after this? What did you notice about the room during your experience? And that led to all kinds of discussions about all the small items that were clues or indices that you might encounter in an environment outside this room in everyday life that might be an indication that there's something amiss in someone's life that you might want to probe a little bit about. And also asking, could you identify any signs of mistreatment that you've noticed, in your own kind of life? And what did you know or learn about mistreatment as a result of going through the room Yeah, so as I mentioned, these were kind of very deep and profound. I found debriefs, and I've done a lot of interviewing in debrief sessions, but I found this a very, very provocative way to provoke it, to get it into a discussion.
That's the importance of good preparation for the debrief sessions and the approach used in It's Not Right. The idea is to just kind of check people's value system by kind of saying, is it possible that, you know, the daughter is not that bad and maybe she's just going through a hard time? Because, you know, it's like people jump to conclusions and they want to solve the problem right away, but maybe you need to go a little bit further. So if you, like I said, normalizes like a very negative reaction, but then it kind of saying, you know, sometimes you have to kind of be careful of judgments that you make and jumping the gun, because if you're going to help somebody, you're going to have to go at their pace, and maybe there's something there, and there's probably a lot there that you do not know.
And so kind of as we reflect on this project and we as a team even talk about further next steps for it, there's kind of some key things that we really pulled out of it. And so I think most importantly, and as the debriefs really showed, the escape room format provides a very unique space to kind of create conversation around these issues. When people are kind of in this game environment, but also it's a serious environment, they come out of it with a lot of emotions, one, an excitement because they were able to solve those puzzles and clues, but also they have some questions or they're curious. And even as we asked you a quick puzzle today, and I mean, some people in chat responded with numbers, people responded with actual solutions too to the issues themselves. Those were the kind of conversations that came out of it, where it wasn't just, you know, I noticed this or I noticed that. It was also people trying to think about like what they could do, what structures could be in place. And that's where It's Not Right came in as a way to kind of frame how they should position themselves. And so the format of the escape room kind of helps not only situate people for a discussion around it, but it also invites them into it. And it very much generates conversation where they kind of have this experience that they can use to ground their conversation, but then they can also bring in their own experiences into it. And so, for example, we had some students who were foreign exchange students coming into Canada, and they talked about how some of the examples in the game there might play out differently in their culture, and we talked kind of through those situations with them as well. And so as a general preliminary reflection, is the space is fantastic for kind of creating conversation around sensitive social issues and kind of using that to further help teach, but also propose kind of directions to look at.
So, you know, I've been involved in many awareness projects throughout, you know, long career working in countering mistreatment. And this was one of the most interesting projects because it did something that no other did. It actually ended up being geared specifically to a population that we've never reached before. The young adult is not going to necessarily want to come to a talk. He's not going to necessarily want to come and see a video. And this is actually putting many skills at the same time. So I think this project not only is it novel in putting out a problem as a problem-solving way, but it also attracts a population that needs to know about mistreatment, because it's a generation that is going to take care of its parents and is going to work with their grandparents and is going to know other people. And we want them to be sensitized, to reflect, to not let things go by, and to know how to respond. So I was very thrilled to have such a fantastic medium to be able to reach a population that was not ever reached before. So this is the key resource that's been, it's a dedicated resource to if the first victims of mistreatment, whether you're a member of the public or whether you're a professional. And the fact that this resource is open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. is fantastic. And the other thing, one of the things that we want to do, if anybody reacted badly during the debrief, is they could call and get some really good information. The idea is we never want to promote that, you know, you're going to do intervention if you don't know what to do. Like I said, even not intentionally, you could do more harm than good. So one of the things was, if you felt that somebody needed help, let somebody, a professional from the line, they know how to ask questions, how to address issues, how to look for, you know, risks, and how to guide people in the right direction. So it's a great resource to have in hand.